Kia ora. My name is John Tucker. This is Andrew Picard. Andrew teaches in the Postgraduate program here at Carey. Andrew, welcome.
Kia ora, John.
I'm really keen to discuss with you some of our Postgraduate program. Looking ahead to 2020, we've got some really exciting courses on offer. But before we get to that, why should someone consider postgraduate study at Carey? What's the benefits of it? I mean, and what's the particular distinctive approach that Carey offers?
I think the postgraduate program enables students to not just to do study, but to produce research, to produce the fruits of research that others will benefit significantly from. At Carey, we've designed it particularly of interest to intersect theology with lived experience, to think theologically about God's activity in the world, God's mission in the world, God's mission in churches and in communities, and to enable a way to think critically about those things together, that we might get a richer and more comprehensive understanding of what God might be doing in His mission in the world.
Yeah, I love this integration of faith and the resources of our faith with context and practice, and bringing these together so that leaders, pastors, people involved as Christian professionals, wherever we find ourselves, we're equipped in the course of the study to answer questions that are relevant to us where we live and serve. Yeah, that's great. So tell us about some of the courses on offer. I was looking through the brochure, and I actually am reasonably familiar with some of these courses. But Leadership, Divine and Human: Insights from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Tell us about that program.
Yeah, so Mick Duncan's teaching that course. Mick's done a lot of research on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and in the course, Mick's trying to think about theology and leadership, the intersections of those two things together, and reading through the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, particularly about the individual of the leader. Questions about ego and power that Bonhoeffer addresses, and says we need to bring those under the lens of discipleship, and the freedom that comes through being a disciple. So that's the invitation of that course, and what Mick's going to do there too is to begin to think about some contemporary case studies in which perhaps issues of ego and power have overwhelmed forms of leadership, and ways in which we can think in the midst of those, perhaps to better display the gospel.
Okay. What about Isaiah, biblical and missional readings? How's that of value to a prospective student?
So Jonathan Robinson and Emma Stokes are teaching that course, looking at Isaiah obviously as a text in which Israel attempts to understand what God is doing in their midst in quite turbulent times, understanding God's purposes in the midst of some tough times.
His mission purposes.
God's mission purposes. And then what's important as well is to see the way in which New Testament writers draw from Isaiah to frame and understand what God's mission purposes are with Jesus in the New Testament. How are God's promises that God made to Isaiah and the community of Israel now being enacted in and through Christ? And of course that encourages us to think about the same message, the God who is at work within Isaiah in the New Testament and continues to be so. How can that help us to understand God's mission purposes today in ministry and mission in churches and in the community?
Brilliant. Yeah. So here's a mission document, which it's at our disposal. It can resource and inform and equip us in our posture towards mission in this world today. Great. What about this course, Integrative Theology, Studying God, Gospel and Communities? This is a new course which I know you're involved in teaching. Tell us about that.
So I'm teaching it with Steve Holmes, Dr. Steve Holmes from St Andrews. And what the course is trying to do is to think about theology's intersection with lived reality, and what are some of the tools that social science provides us to help us to think critically about the lived reality. So things like ethnography or kaupapa Māori approaches, to understand kind of rich and thick descriptions of our community life, and then for theology's intersection with it. How do we think theologically, understand what God might be doing in the embodied realities of our churches, of our mission actions within communities, and to enrich that understanding, really, the two together, this integration of theology and social science.
So it might be a church community, and a faith community, it might be a neighbourhood community, an organisation in which you serve.
It could be workplace, thinking critically about our workplace and where God is at work in that setting.
It's so exciting to think of theology and sociology coming together to equip and resource leadership. What about one more, Inner Healing with Dr. Phil Holstead? Tell us about that course.
This is Phil's signature course, and Phil really is leading the way in regards to inner healing. The course thinks about the intersection of theology and psychology, and asking questions about us personally. Jesus' redemption brings about redemptive purposes in the world, but especially individually, emotionally, psychologically, personally. And so Phil invites ways for us to understand those things and walks us on the journey toward healing.
So you become, as a student, the case study, right? This becomes a process of enormous personal transformation, but also for the benefit of others in your leadership, in your ministry, being able to replicate that.
Who might walk together with God in this transformative journey.
Great, that's wonderful. 2 more questions real quickly.
Sure.
First of all, is it realistic to bite off, a part-time study if you're involved in full-time work?
We've designed it to be the case. So these are year-long courses with a block course in the first semester and another block course in the second semester. There's a lot of freedom within it to weave it into the practices and patterns that you have in your leadership, to weave in your study around that. So there's a lot of scope for that. And then with it, we're devising a way of being in community together that we're supporting both as faculty and staff and students, supporting each other's learning and growth, because we think the fruit of this research and work is just so critical for churches and Christian communities and leaders.
Brilliant. Scholarships, grants, financial support, what's available?
So we have scholarships available for Māori and Pacifica students, we have scholarships for female students, and we have scholarships available for registered Baptist pastors, as well as some general scholarships. So really trying to encourage people into this learning journey.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate your time. This is really exciting. I'm really I'm looking forward to next year and our postgraduate program, what's going to happen there. I hope to see some of you on the program next year, if at all possible. But until then, have a blessed Christmas. Let me finish with some words from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The Advent season is a season of waiting, but our whole life is an Advent season. That is a season of waiting for the last Advent, for the time when there will be a new heaven and a new earth. God bless.